Okay, so let's unpack this. Imagine you are tasked with solving like a multi-billion euro national budget crisis.
Oh, sounds stressful already.
Right. And the stakes literally dictate whether hundreds of thousands of people can afford to, turn their heat on this winter.
A literal life or death situation for some.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Your key negotiating partner is currently camping somewhere in France.
Naturally.
Yeah, and they claim to have terrible cell reception. And on top of that, your own internal team sitting at the table with you, well, they can't even agree on how to calculate the deficit.
I mean, it sounds like the pitch for a stressful political thriller, really. But it is the very real, very current state of affairs in the Netherlands right now as the government races toward Prinsjesdag.
Which is their annual budget day for those following along. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We are exploring the incredibly complex, just high-stakes puzzle of Dutch politics leading up to this huge deadline.
Yeah, it's quite a puzzle. We're looking at a pretty revealing interview from WNL's radio show, Sven op 1, with Stephan Neijenhuis.
Right. He's a newer member of parliament handling the social affairs portfolio for the centrist D66 party.
And he is just right in the dead center of this storm, trying to figure out how a country balances its budget when labor unions, coalition partners, and just harsh economic realities all sort of collide at once.
It's a massive collision. And, I have to say this right up front for you listening, because this deep dive pulls from an interview navigating highly charged territory. I mean, we're talking left-wing union strikes, right-wing tax policies, everything in between.
It covers the whole spectrum.
It really does. So our goal today isn't to pick a winner or take any sides. We are just acting as impartial guides. We're mapping out the mechanics of the chessboard so you can see all the underlying moves, regardless of who you might be rooting for.
Which is really the best way to approach this material, honestly, because the mechanics here are just fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this isn't just a story about Dutch politics. It's really a masterclass in the friction between structural economic necessity and the agonizingly slow reality of modern political gridlock.
Yeah, gridlock is the perfect word for it.
Yeah.
But to understand that gridlock, we have to start with the actual fire burning on the ground, right? Before we even touch the French campsites or the coalition infighting, we have to look at the cost of living.
The real-world impact.
Exactly. The source material pulls some incredibly stark data from the CBS and TNO research institutes regarding energy poverty. And it's pretty heavy.
It is. The numbers paint a really sobering picture of the baseline pressure that the cabinet is under right now. Like currently, there are 500,000 households in the Netherlands stuck in energy poverty.
500,000 households. That is a lot of people struggling to keep the lights on.
It's a huge number. And what stands out in the TNO research isn't just the sheer volume of people, but the trajectory of their debt.
Right, because the overall number of households in that category hasn't really spiked dramatically in the last few months, has it?
No, it hasn't. But the depth of their individual financial holes has deepened significantly.
Okay, so they're digging a deeper hole, essentially.
Precisely. Their average annual deficit, which is the actual shortfall between what they earn and the basic cost to keep the heat and lights on, that grew from 577 euros to 624 euros.
Wow. You look at a jump from 577 to 624, and on a macroeconomic spreadsheet, I mean, that looks like a rounding error.
A tiny blip.
Right. But we're talking about an extra 50 euros a month in deficit for families who are already at absolute zero.
When you have no buffer, an extra 50 euros a month literally means skipping meals. It's brutal.
It really is. And the government is acutely aware of this, obviously, because, I mean, we saw them implement massive sweeping financial support during the peak of the last energy crisis.
Right. €190 payout.
Yeah, they effectively sent everyone 190 euros to cushion the blow. But, I mean, the strategy has to shift now, right? You can't just keep dropping helicopter money on the entire population every single winter.
No, you really can't. It's wildly inefficient.
Yeah.
And the administrative machinery required to do that is just totally unsustainable.
So why did they do it the first time? Just panic.
Well, blanket measures were deployed previously, mostly because of speed. It's administratively much faster to just send everyone the exact same check than to meticulously means test millions of households during an active crisis.
That makes sense. You just need to get the money out the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Neijenhuis emphasizes in the interview that the cabinet has learned from that phase. Targeted help is the only fiscally responsible path forward now.
Okay, so what does targeted help actually look like in this budget?
So Minister Hans Wilbrief promised a temporary energy emergency fund specifically for this coming winter. The government earmarked 193 million euros for it.
Okay, 193 million. Sounds like a good chunk of change.
It does. But then the T&O calculations come back and essentially say, that's cute, but to actually cover the households in the danger zone, you actually need 256 million.
Oh, wow. So that immediately creates a massive funding gap.
Yeah, a gap of over 50 million euros. And the cabinet has to find that money somewhere in an already strained budget.
And I found Neijenhuis's response to this quite telling in the interview, because he flat out refuses to promise golden mountains.
Right, he was very firm on that.
He acknowledges the 50 million euro gap, but he won't just invent magical funding on live radio.
It's a very pragmatic stance, and it reflects the really tight constraints of the social affairs portfolio. But he also points out that his party, D66, supported a motion from Mirjam Bikker.
And what did that motion do exactly?
It established a hard political mandate saying that poverty must not increase during this cabinet period.
Oh, so they're completely boxed in.
Exactly. They have a mandate to prevent poverty from rising. They have a 50 million immediate shortfall for the winter fund, and they know they need long-term structural fixes so they aren't having this exact same panic next August.
Right, structural fixes like the insulation offensive that was championed by Stanche van Veldhoven, which honestly, the logic there is just rock solid.
It really is. It gets to the root of the issue.
Exactly. If you invest heavily in domestic sustainable energy and you physically insulate the housing stock, you drastically lower the baseline energy consumption.
You solve the problem at the root rather than just subsidizing the symptom forever.
Right. But to fund an insulation offensive or even just to plug a 50 million emergency gap, you need a finalized budget.
You do. You need money to move.
And to finalize the budget smoothly before Prinsjesdag, the cabinet desperately wanted to secure this grand social agreement with employers and labor unions.
Which brings us to the massive roadblock in this whole process. Because the cabinet had factored in 6.5 billion euros in long-term structural cuts, or reforms as they call them, to the social security system.
6.5 billion. And we're talking about the AOW, the WW, the WIA, right? The core safety nets.
The very core of it, yeah. Taking $6.5 billion out of that machinery is a colossal move.
It's like trying to pull a massive structural beam out of a skyscraper while people are still working in the offices.
That's a great way to put it. You have to do it incredibly carefully. And usually, you need everyone in the building to agree on the renovation plan before you start pulling beams.
But the unions, I mean, they are fiercely protective of these systems, and their reaction hasn't exactly been to negotiate a better renovation plan, has it?
No, not at all. Their reaction has been to completely freeze the government out. The demands from the unions are just absolute right now.
Like, they won't even talk.
They want a definitive cancellation of that $6.5 billion in proposed cuts before they will even sit down at the negotiating table.
That is wild. They are refusing to negotiate the terms of the reform. They are demanding the reform be abandoned entirely as a precondition for eye contact.
It's a fascinating negotiation tactic for sure, but also incredibly frustrating if you are the one trying to actually balance the national budget.
I mean, it's like calling a plumber because your house is flooding, and the plumber says, well, I'll only come over if you sign a contract promising never to replace the pipes.
Exactly. And the imagery the interview provides around this standoff is almost cinematic.
Oh my gosh, yes. Hans Beckman, the leader of the FNV union.
Right. He is literally spending the first 3 weeks of August camping in France.
Just chilling at a campsite while the country's budget is on fire.
Yep. The government is desperately trying to reach him to hammer out this social agreement. The minister is even offering to physically drive to his location in France.
And the union's response is essentially, sorry, terrible reception at the campsite, can't hear you.
Yeah. The radio silence is being used as a weapon. And the threat looming right behind that silence is 2 weeks of organized strikes in September.
Timed perfectly to disrupt the political season as it kicks into high gear.
Exactly. And Neijenhuis, he doesn't hide his frustration in the interview at all. He calls it out directly as political word games.
And you can really see his point. I mean, you cannot solve complex macroeconomic issues by placing a metaphorical fence around them, crossing your arms, and dictating terms from a French campsite.
You really can't. And the deeper structural argument Neijenhuis makes here is about the nature of governance itself. By boycotting the table over the $6.5 billion, the unions are paralyzing the entire apparatus.
Right, because everything is connected.
Exactly. There are dozens of other interconnected issues within social affairs, like the Energy Poverty Fund we just discussed, where the government And the unions might actually share common ground.
Where they could actually make some incremental progress and help people right now.
Yes. But by refusing to talk at all, valuable weeks are just lost where real solutions could be drafted.
So the cabinet is blocked by the unions on the outside. But the pressure cooker gets even hotter when you look at the internal puzzle, right?
Oh, the internal puzzle is a whole other level of complicated.
Because if the government can't secure the $6.5 billion in Social Security reforms because of this massive union backlash, they still have to balance the books.
The math doesn't just go away.
No, it doesn't. They have to find that money somewhere else. And instantly, a massive ideological rift opens up within the coalition itself.
This internal friction really highlights the unique, sort of messy mechanics of this specific Dutch cabinet.
Break that down for us. What are the sides here?
Where you have D66, represented in this context by Minister Vielbrief, suggesting that raising the wealth tax is not a taboo. Like if they can't cut spending, they should look at taxing capital to fill the structural hole.
Makes sense from their perspective. But then who is on the other side?
Sitting right across from him is the VVD party, with Finance Minister Ilko Heinen, and he completely opposes tax hikes.
So his mandate is strict.
Very strict. His stance is, we agreed on no new taxes when we formed this coalition, therefore we must find spending cuts.
So you have two hands on the steering wheel pulling in completely opposite directions.
Exactly. And because this is a minority cabinet, they can't just brute force a compromise through the legislature. They simply don't have the baseline seat count.
So they have to go out shopping for votes.
Right. They have to go out into the Eerste Kamer or the Senate and physically scrape together enough votes from opposition parties to pass whatever budget they eventually agree on.
And that vote scraping process is incredibly delicate. Like, if the cabinet looks to the left flank, hoping to build a coalition with Groenlink's PVDA, they hit a wall.
A massive wall.
Yeah.
Because those left-leaning parties are very closely aligned with the labor unions.
And the unions are currently on strike and out of reach in France, so the left flank is politically closed off as long as the $6.5 billion standoff continues.
Exactly. So if the left is closed, they have to pivot to the right flank. They could try to horse trade with a party like J21.
But wait, J21 only holds, like, 2 seats in the Senate, right?
Just 2 seats. So you can't just make one big grand deal to secure a majority. You have to cobble together a patchwork of agreements with multiple tiny factions.
And I imagine each of those tiny factions is demanding their own policy concessions in exchange for their votes.
Oh, of course. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. MP Jan Paternotte had a brilliant description of this in the source material.
Oh, the abacus quote?
Yes.
Yeah.
He said that to miraculously calculate a majority with this totally fragmented right wing, the cabinet would need a special abacus.
A special abacus. I mean, the sheer exhaustion of that political calculus is just staggering to think about. Every single euro in the budget becomes a multi-party negotiation.
It sounds like a nightmare. But Neijenhuis actually offers a surprisingly elegant, optimistic way of viewing this internal friction.
The choir analogy. I loved this part of the interview.
It's so good, right?
Yeah, so Neijenhuis sings in the Midden-Gelderland classical choir, and he applies that musical dynamic directly to the cabinet.
Which is such a unique perspective for a politician.
It really is.
Yeah.
He explains that if every single person in a choir sings the exact same note in unison, the result is completely flat and boring.
Right.
The beauty, the actual depth of the music comes from harmony. It comes from different voices singing different notes, but working together within a structured piece to create something complete.
It's a really powerful defense of ideological diversity within a coalition. He's arguing that the VVD and D66, they don't need to pretend they have the exact same core philosophies.
They can be different voices.
Exactly. The tension between taxing wealth and cutting spending isn't necessarily a fatal flaw. It's a feature of a working democracy. The friction ensures that all perspectives are stress-tested.
Provided the parties can actually harmonize when it comes time to vote, of course.
Well, yeah, that's the tricky part.
Because it's a beautiful sentiment, but harmony doesn't pay the bills. The special abacus still needs to tally up, which forces us to look at the core debate underlying this entire political circus.
The big question.
Yeah. Are these $6.5 billion in cuts actually necessary? Is the Social Security system truly bankrupting the country, or is this, a manufactured crisis designed to shrink the welfare state?
That is the multi-billion-euro question at the heart of the whole standoff. And the interview dives into some really compelling macroeconomic data to frame both sides of this argument.
Right, because in the interview, they bring up statistics from Telegraph economist Martin Visser. And his data really challenges the whole narrative of a bankrupt system.
It does. Visser points out that back in 1995, the Netherlands spent 10.7% of its total GDP on the AOW, WW, and WIA combined.
Okay, 10.7%.
But today, that number has actually dropped to 8.5%.
Wait, really? It dropped?
It dropped. Now, if the percentage of the total economy dedicated to Social Security has steadily gone down over the last few decades, it's very easy to look at that and say, wait a minute, the welfare state is actually shrinking relative to our wealth.
Right. So why are we panicking about 6.5 billion? Aren't politicians just using the Social Security system as a piggy bank to fund their other pet projects?
It's a very sharp observation by Visser, but Neijenhuis provides a vital countercontext that explains why the cabinet is actually in panic mode.
Okay, what's his counter-argument?
Well, he says you cannot assess the health of these systems purely through the lens of GDP ratios, because GDP fluctuates and grows based on broader economic forces.
Oh, I see. So the pie got bigger, so the slice looks smaller, even if it's technically a huge slice of cake.
Exactly. You have to look at the absolute raw numbers and the unavoidable demographic trajectory the country is locked into.
The actual cash leaving the treasury?
Precisely. In absolute terms, the Netherlands currently spends a staggering 150 billion euros annually on benefits.
150 billion, that is massive.
It is. And because of the aging population, the baby boomer generation fully moving into retirement, the AOW alone is projected to require an additional 17 billion euros over just the next 5 years.
Finding an extra 17 billion in 5 years just to maintain the baseline status quo for pensions? That is a massive task. That money has to come from somewhere.
And even if demographic models show that those costs will eventually peak around 2040 and then begin to recede as the population curve normalizes.
Which is a long time from now.
Right. That long-term projection doesn't solve the immediate cash flow crisis today. The Treasury cannot pay today's pensioners with projected savings from 20 years in the future.
Obviously not.
The demographic wave is hitting right now, and the infrastructure is buckling under the weight.
And we can see exactly how it buckles when we zoom in on the WIA, the disability system. Because the deep dive sources highlight that this system faced a 1 billion euro setback this year alone.
Yeah, 1 billion in the red.
But this isn't just a spreadsheet problem, right? This is a profound operational failure that is causing immense human suffering. The influx of people entering the disability system is currently twice as high as it was when these laws were initially designed.
The architecture of the WIA simply wasn't built to process this kind of volume. It just can't handle it.
And because of that sheer volume, the system is breaking down at the most critical bottleneck, the medical examiners.
The doctors.
Right, the doctors legally required to evaluate whether someone is truly disabled and what specific benefits they qualify for. There is a massive shortage of these examiners. You have sick employees facing waiting lists of up to 2 years just to get an initial assessment.
2 years. And the mechanism of this delay creates a really devastating ripple effect. For the individual, it means sitting in bureaucratic limbo for 24 months.
While chronically ill.
Chronically ill, unable to work, and totally uncertain about your financial future.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Neijenhuis doesn't mince words here. He literally calls the situation inhumane. And, it's a nightmare for businesses, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because during those 2 years of waiting, the employer is legally obligated to continue paying sick leave. So you have small businesses carrying the financial weight of absent employees for years, solely because the government can't find enough doctors to process the paperwork.
This is exactly why throwing €1 billion at the problem doesn't actually fix it. You can't just go out and buy new medical examiners overnight.
Right. They don't grow on trees.
Exactly. The system itself requires deep structural reform to change how evaluations are triggered and processed.
Which is exactly why the cabinet is desperate to implement changes, and exactly why they're clashing with unions who fear those changes will strip away worker protections.
It's a brutal catch-22. And if we pan out to the macro level, the cabinet is trying to manage this buckling welfare state while simultaneously dealing with massive existential priorities that are competing for every single available euro.
Right, because the world outside the Social Security system is also demanding attention. The interview lays out these competing crises pretty clearly. First, the government has to massively increase funding for national defense.
Neijenhuis explicitly points to the reality of protecting the nation's airspace from Putin's drones.
Yeah, that's not cheap. That requires heavy capital investment. Then you have the domestic housing crisis. The state needs to figure out the logistics and funding to build 100,000 houses next year just to keep up with demand.
To keep pace, yeah.
And hovering over all of this is the nitrogen crisis, which has essentially frozen agricultural development and construction projects across the whole country due to environmental regulations.
So when critics, or the unions, accuse the cabinet of using Social Security as a piggy bank, the cabinet's counter-argument is essentially one of national triage.
Triage is a good word for it.
They are trying to fund the physical military security of the nation, put roofs over a growing population, and restart a legally stalled agricultural economy, all while the baseline cost of pensions is skyrocketing by $17 billion.
It is the ultimate administrative juggling act. So let's synthesize this whole chessboard we've mapped out for you today. You have a cabinet scraping the budget to find $50 million to keep 500,000 vulnerable households out of freezing energy poverty this coming winter.
Right.
To allocate those funds, they desperately need a finalized budget. To pass that budget, they need a grand social agreement. But the labor unions are stonewalling them over $6.5 billion in proposed structural reforms, threatening strikes, and, ignoring phone calls from French campsites.
Meanwhile, inside the coalition itself, ministers are deeply divided over the fundamental economic philosophy of whether to raise wealth taxes or cut spending.
And because they lack a majority, they're forced to rely on a special abacus to scrounge up votes from tiny opposition factions just to pass basic legislation in the Senate.
All while trying to structurally overhaul a clogged, inhumane disability system where sick citizens are waiting 2 years for a doctor's note.
And simultaneously finding the capital to build 100,000 houses, untangle the nitrogen gridlock, and buy modern defense systems. I mean, the sheer volume of friction is just astounding.
It really crystallizes the core tension of this entire deep dive. There is a profound, undeniable friction between the urgent need for long-term structural economic reforms to keep the state solvent and the agonizingly slow, fragmented reality of short-term political maneuvering.
The math demands immediate, decisive action.
But the political structure naturally rewards digging your heels in and refusing to compromise.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating dynamic to consider moving forward. As internal national politics become increasingly fragmented and paralyzed by these performative standoffs where unions won't talk and coalitions can't agree, at what point does a higher authority step in?
That's the big unknown.
If the Dutch government simply cannot pass mathematically necessary reforms due to gridlock, how long before supranational entities like the European Commission step in and mandate these fiscal corrections to protect the stability of the Eurozone?
It's a very real possibility.
Will local democratic gridlock eventually be overridden by strict European fiscal rules? It's a lingering question about who actually holds the final pen on a nation's budget. Thank you for joining us to map out this complex puzzle. Keep exploring the mechanics behind the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.